We are honored to have with us today Representative Obernolte of California. Representative Obernolte is a highly active member of both the House Energy and Commerce and Science, Space, and Technology committees, and has represented California's 23rd district since 2021. Since taking office, he has had several bills signed into law to help protect our nation's supply chain and to improve our defense against cyber terrorism. As a member of the Congressional Artificial Intelligence Caucus and former tech entrepreneur, he is a leader in AI policy for the House Republicans. With that, please welcome Representative Jay Obernolte.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is great to be here. So I'm Jay Obernolte. I represent the 23rd District of California, but what you need to know about me, first of all, I'm one of the few computer scientists currently serving in Congress. In fact, I would say we are underrepresented, and you, the folks in this room, can do something about that. So we need to encourage more computer scientists to serve in Congress, because I think knowledge of all things technical, but particularly computer science and artificial intelligence, is going to be very critical when we contemplate rulemaking and regulatory authority in the next couple of decades. So let's get more computer scientists in Congress. But the other thing that you need to know about me is that originally my ambition in life was to do research in artificial intelligence. I was going to be an academic. I went to Caltech, got my undergraduate in computer science there, and then was working on my doctorate degree at UCLA when my career kind of got derailed. I had a side hustle. I wrote AI for video games. I answered a want ad on our bulletin board in our computer science at Caltech from a company few people had ever heard of before, but maybe you've heard of them. They call themselves Nintendo. And they had just introduced their first game machine in North America, the Nintendo Entertainment System. They were looking for English-speaking programmers to help them write code for that platform. And so that's what I did, just as a side hustle to put myself through graduate school. But then when I was at UCLA working on my doctorate in AI, something happened that changed my whole life. One of the games that I'd written for the Sega Genesis, which shows you how long ago it was an NFL football game. It went platinum, and I remember vividly reading the sales statement thinking, you could actually make a living doing this. And so that kind of derailed my career when I left UCLA. Instead of going into academics and research, I started a video game development studio that I still have today. So that was kind of the trajectory of my career. But AI remains something that I care very deeply about. When it's amazing to see how far the industry has gone. When I was doing research, it was the very early days of natural language processing and computer vision. And now you look at tools like ChatGPT, which we could not have even imagined that 30 years ago when I was at UCLA. So it's an exciting new world, but it's also going to bring challenges. So that's kind of what I'd like to have a dialogue about for a few minutes here this afternoon, is the regulatory challenges surrounding AI and what the role of the government and Congress in particular is going to be in establishing that regulatory guidance. So first of all, I think it's very important when we approach the job of regulating something to ask ourselves, why are we seeking to regulate this? I think too many people look at AI and think, oh, it's big, it's scary, we really don't understand it very well, we must regulate it. And I think that's the wrong approach. I think the approach should be, what do we fear? What are the negative consequences that government intervention can either prevent or mitigate? And then ask the follow-up question, how do we mitigate those potential harms? And if we follow that kind of philosophy, I think we'll succeed in establishing a regulatory framework that's appropriate for AI. You'd be surprised at how often I have to explain to some of my colleagues that the chief danger of AI is not an army of evil robots with red laser eyes rising up to take over the world. That's what we've been accustomed to think about when we think about the harms of AI. I think that most of the deep thinkers in AI would agree that that's not the chief danger, might not even be in the top 10, but there are very real dangers associated with AI that we are going to have to deal with. And some of those dangers are things that fall squarely in the purview of government to prevent and to mitigate. So chief amongst those is the fact that AI is going to be extremely disruptive. It's going to be socially disruptive. It's going to be economically disruptive. So we have to figure out, as as public servants, what our role is in either preventing or mitigating that disruption. Every technological innovation has been disruptive, all the way back to the advent of the printing press, most recently the advent of the internet. But I think we all in this room would acknowledge that AI has the potential to be even more disruptive economically and socially than the internet was. So we are in the early days of this disruption, but we should think deeply about what this disruption means, how it's going to occur, who it's going to affect, and what we need to do about it. And we also need to learn some of the lessons of previous economic disruptions, particularly the ones that were driven by technological innovation. There's a famous one at the very dawn of the Industrial Revolution in 18th century England, when they transitioned from manual weaving of cloth into automated textile looms. And this created extreme disruption in the workforce because there was a large group of workers who felt like machines and technology were displacing them and taking their jobs away. So they burned those textile looms, and they became kind of an example of recalcitrance and objection to technological innovation. But if you think back to it, they had a point, right? They definitely had a point. Machines were taking their jobs away. But viewed through the lens of history, I don't think you can argue that on a societal level that was a bad thing, because what happened as a result of the automated weaving of cloth is that for the first time in all of human history, high-quality cloth garments became available to the average person. Before, it was just the rich, and everyone else wore homespun. And so you could tell at a glance when you met someone on the street whether or not they were wealthy or whether or not they were middle or lower class, just by looking at the clothes that they wear. And this was the first time that that was no longer true. So we couldn't argue that government should have stepped in and prevented the loss of those jobs, because that also would have prevented the economic and social good that that innovation brought. So we're going to be grappling with a similar situation here, because we're going to be facing similar levels of disruption. And so I hope that we get to a place where we can agree it's our job to mitigate that disruption. We're certainly going to have to, first of all, invest more in education. We're going to have to embrace this idea that being a productive member of a 21st century workforce means being knowledgeable about how to use AI to enhance your productivity and help you do the job that you do. We're going to have to educate people on that. We're going to have to embrace lifelong learning, because one of the things that AI is really good at is organizing human knowledge, and it's become abundantly clear that this old educational model that we currently have, where we go to college and we acquire an education, and then we can use that education for the next 30 or 40 years in our career, that is absolutely outdated, right? The pace of human knowledge and its advancement is moving far too swiftly for that. We have to embrace the idea that we all need to be lifelong learners. And guess what? AI is able to help us with that. But it's a complete change in philosophy from the educational model that we've followed for the last 500 years. That's going to be disruptive. We're going to have workers that get displaced that we're going to need to find new places for. We're going to have a robust social safety net to make sure that those people don't fall through the cracks. We're going to have to invest in job retraining, and we're going to have to be open-minded about a whole new categories of job that arise to take the place of the jobs that have been disrupted. So all of these are things that we're going to be grappling with in Congress. And that's not even to talk about some of the legal challenges that we're going to have to navigate. The chief and foremost right now is this idea of the training data sets that go into training AI. What is fair to include in those training sets? Is intellectual property fair game? Well, we think we can probably agree that creative people have a right to what they produce. That's been a long-standing tenet of our society. But we have a lot of gray area in the middle. What happens when someone produces something and makes it available for public consumption, but not with the understanding that it can be used to train AI to turn out a lot of similar works just like it, right? So how are we going to navigate that? When generative AI is used to create something, is that copyrightable? If so, who owns the copyright to that? The AI algorithm can't. Is it the creator of the algorithm? Is it the person that engineered the prompt that resulted in whatever it is, a movie, a beautiful painting, whatever it is that generative AI created? How much credit is due to the people that created the work similar to that were used to train the generative AI? So I don't pretend to have answers to all of these things, but these are the things that we need to be thinking about, not only as a country, not only as a government, but in Congress, as we tackle the regulatory hurdles around this. And then lastly, and I hope, hopefully most simply, we need to figure out what a regulatory framework looks like for AI. And we have a real divergence of philosophy here, because we've got the EU, who has been working on the EU AI Act for the last 2 years now, who has the philosophy that AI is this new thing. We're going to spin up a new bureaucracy. We're going to risk categorize everything that's AI related. And if you fall into anything but a low risk category, you need essentially a license, a permission slip from your government to use AI. And we're going to create a bureaucracy filled with experts, and problem solved, right? Moving on. And already we've seen some of the problems with that kind of approach, because a month ago I spent an entire weekend reading the revisions to the EU AI Act that were just introduced a couple of months ago, as a result of the fact that when the AI Act was created, generative AI was unknown, large language models were not yet a thing, and so they had to go back and say, oh shoot, we better account for all of these things. So that's one problem. But the bigger problem, from my point of view, is that we already have our sectoral regulating authorities that are having to deal with this problem now, not tomorrow. Now they're having to deal with this. We had a hearing in the Health Subcommittee last week in which I was astonished that the FDA testified they had over 500 applications for the use of AI in medical devices in the last year. 500 applications. So they're having to deal with this question of patient safety and the interaction between that and AI now. They're having to deal with, if you retrain an AI algorithm that they've already issued a license for, does that require a new license? Is it a condition of the existing license? They're having to think about this displacement that takes place. They're having to think, or CMS is having to think about how to cover these various AI-enabled training or treatment regimes. So, and this is just the FDA. We have all of our other sectoral authorities that are grappling with this same problem in different domains. The FDA, the FAA with autonomously piloted drones. We're having to deal with NHTSA, of course, with autonomously driven cars. So all of our sectoral authorities are already having to solve this problem. So here's the question, and this is a rhetorical question. I don't have an answer to it yet, but I think you can figure out the way I'm leaning. Do we preempt that away from all of our sectoral authorities and say, no, we're going to create a whole nother regulatory body to deal with this regulation, and just because it's AI, we're going to take decision-making authority away from you and give it to somebody else? Or do we allow our existing sectoral authorities to exercise their existing power with regulating their existing spaces and then spin up the technical resources that they need to accomplish that job? And I think that would probably be a better way to go. We call that a hub and spoke model. The spokes are all of our existing sectoral authorities, like the FDA, and the hub would be a pool of technical resource, experts that could help a AI regulatory sandbox that can be used to test AI, a resource that can be brought to bear, maybe an advisory body, kind of like the NTSB, the role that they play with the FAA, where they can make recommendations like, hey, have you thought about this? Because this might be a good idea. So we're in the early days of trying to figure this out, but I think that if we are guided by those principles, the principle that we need to figure out why we regulate, we need to figure out what harms we're trying to mitigate so that we can build a framework that does that mitigation, and if we try and focus on empowering the existing sectoral authorities with an eye towards not regulating algorithms, but regulating outcomes, I think that we'll be successful. So obviously it's something I care deeply about. I thank you for being here and being part of the discussion, because only by working together, I'm talking about government, industry, and academia, are we going to be able to solve this problem. But if we do, the fruits of that labor could be an expansion in productivity and an economic activity that we have not experienced for 100 years. And I think that's a real benefit there waiting for us if we can do our jobs right. So thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to our Q&A.
Congressman, thank you so much for joining us today and for staying for a little fireside chat Q&A. It is so delightful to have somebody with a computer science background in Congress who can explain to everyone and your colleagues what's happening and what it all means. I want to just start with a broad question, which is, we're talking about this now, but it's been going on for a while. Why do you think that the public and now policymakers got so quickly energized about AI after the generative AI came out?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that although from an academic standpoint, the advance of AI has been fairly gradual, that just recently we've had these generative large language models such as BARD and ChatGPT that have illustrated the potential of AI. We've got something called the Turing test in computer science that is supposed to be the test that indicates when we've achieved general intelligence in AI. And that's when someone at the end of a communications line typing into a computer can't tell if they're talking to AI or a real person on the other end. That would be called passing the Turing test. And before, it's always been very clear that we weren't even close. Right. But when you interact with ChatGPT, I mean, it certainly doesn't pass the Turing test, but I think it illustrates the potential. For the first time, people look at that and say, oh my goodness, this is almost like talking to a person. I think that's what's catalyzed the sudden interest.
Well, and you were right to go straight to what is happening in the EU. And following exactly what Europe does is, I don't believe, the right model for the United States. But they are starting to centralize into one authority. Now you hear Senator Schumer's putting together his SAFE framework. The White House, I know, put out some voluntary commitments from some of our member companies and other companies. Can you, just based on what's happening, all the activity, talk about what House Republicans are going to do? Who will you work with? What do you support that's already going on? The Schumer discussions, the White House's efforts. Give us your perspective from House Republicans.
Sure. So, I mean, to be clear, I don't speak for House Republicans. I don't speak for the House. We have a working group in AI that the Speaker has put together. It is not a Republican working group. It's a bipartisan working group. It's not a formal body. Anyone who's interested can join and show up to our meetings. He's kind of informally asked me to head it up just because I've been doing some thinking in this space. But I think, first of all, talking about the frameworks that have been offered, overwhelmingly, these are positive things. It's good. It's great that we are talking about this. I've certainly been talking with my colleagues in the Senate. I've been talking with OSTP in the White House. I think that the voluntary standards that they've come up with are really, forward-looking. I'm not sure these are things that I would be in favor of requiring, but it's a great first step in thinking about what does it mean when we say that AI is trustworthy? What do we mean when we say that AI is responsible? What do we mean when we say it's human-centered, right? These are not technical terms. They're kind of moral terms. There's a lot of emotional content in there. So this is all great. Talking about like the regulatory landscape, I think the thing that we need to focus on is that to catalyze the investment that's going to be required in this technology. I mean, thinking about the fact that training a next generation generative large language model probably is going to cost $100 million. That's going to be the starting point. That kind of investment can only occur if there's regulatory certainty. The one thing that investment capital hates is uncertainty. This thought that they could make this investment and tomorrow someone up in the government could decide, you know what, that's illegal. So we need to provide that certainty. We need to create a landscape where we make forward-thinking decisions about what is allowed, what's not allowed, and the way that government is going to intersect with industry in regulating it. And to provide certainty, it has to be durable. So it can't be that next year we change our minds and do something different, which is what's so destructive about what the EU is doing, because they're trying to solve the whole problem now. And I think what's become abundantly clear is it's going to be the work of decades, not years or months, to have this whole regulatory focus, scheme come into focus. So what we need to do is we need to take we need to be more granular. We need to take the pieces, the bite-sized pieces that we know we can digest and get right now and do those first. So to be durable, it's got to be bicameral and it's got to be bipartisan, because the one thing that we can't have is we get a new president in office, we get someone a change of control in the Senate, a change of control in the House, and all of a sudden all the rules change, because that's going to be very disruptive to everything we're trying to do. And this is not a partisan issue, so we're trying to engage everyone in having this conversation.
I love the bipartisan spirit that you just put forward, because this is about American jobs, American growth, America's global leadership in this space. Privacy is a great way to look at how we should have done something 3 years ago when the FTC first said we should have, and pass a national privacy law. California recently passed a privacy law. I know you're from California. They keep amending it and changing it. It's very difficult for businesses, particularly small and medium-sized businesses, to quickly adapt, as you just mentioned, with durability. So I think a foundational need is a national privacy law, preemptive, that gives the rules of the road for how we utilize data. Do you agree, and do you see a privacy law as being a national imperative?
Yes, I absolutely do agree. The little-known fact is that before serving in Congress, I served in the California legislature, and I was the Republican lead for the drafting and passage of the California Consumer Privacy Act. So we could have an hour-long discussion about what to do and what not to do and the lessons learned from that. But one of the big lessons learned was we were under time pressure for reasons that don't bear going into, but we knew when we passed it that there were some problematic areas that we just hadn't had the time to get right. And we naively thought that we'd be able to come back the next year and pass a cleanup bill, and then the year after that and pass a cleanup bill as the implementational difficulties became clear. What we did not realize is that when you create a regulatory landscape with winners and losers, all of the winners are going to get together and try to prevent you from fixing the problems that created the winners, and empowering the people that are losers, even if it's not fair that they were winners. It's dollars and cents at stake. All the winners are going to get together and trying to prevent you from fixing those problems. So that made it much more difficult to solve those problems in future years. So that's why it's so important that we get it right. But getting to your question about a federal data privacy standard, I think it's very clear that this needs to happen, and sooner rather than later. There are a couple of problems. First of all, we have allowed a regulatory landscape to exist in the United States with respect to digital data privacy that is completely state-driven. So that means that there are eventually going to be 50 different state regulations with regard to digital data privacy. Right now, I think there are 26, as of this week. But eventually, we're going to get to 50. And that's very destructive to entrepreneurialism, because the only people that have the legal sophistication to deal with a regulatory space that complex are the big established companies. The people that don't have the sophistication to deal with that are two guys trying to start a company in a garage. Right? And yet, if we look at our history, that's where the Googles and the Apples of the world came from. So we want to preserve that. We want to preserve America as a country that fosters that spirit of entrepreneurialism. So and the other thing is, it's so obviously related to interstate commerce. I think it absolutely has to be preempted away from the states, and we need to establish one standard. But the other thing is, we were talking about, when we look at AI, the need to mitigate potential harms. And if you ask me about what are the short-term biggest threats that AI poses, it's when we talk about general intelligence, that's years and years off. We have some runway on that. But the near-term threats are the way that AI uses data to make eerily accurate predictions of human behavior and empower people to influence that behavior. It's already being used that way. AI also has, because of its pattern recognition capabilities, the ability to re-aggregate digital data that's supposedly been de-aggregated. So if you go to a data broker now and you say, I want a bunch of data on this particular topic, you can buy that, and it's all been disaggregated, supposedly. But if you buy data in one field from this broker, one field from that broker, one field from that broker, AI can put that back together and identify the individual people that data comes from, because that's what AI does, right? That AI can recognize those patterns and put it back together. So that pierces through the supposed privacy that disaggregation is supposed to create. So in the near term, in the pantheon of near-term harms, that's the biggest one, and that's why we absolutely need to act on that. So we had a bill in the House that definitely had some problems, but was a great step in the right direction, that was passed out of Energy and Commerce last year. We're working on a new bill this year. I am cautiously optimistic that we're going to succeed in getting that onto the House floor for a vote this year and over to the Senate. That's what needs to be done.
And we're optimistic it'll make it through all the way to the Senate too. But even if the House passes a really good model, it'll help with the states as they look for something to pick up on for a standard for a bill. Last question for you. There's been a lot of talk about jobs. I heard you mention it. People are worried about jobs. Is AI going to take my job? But then also, as we build the AI innovation economy, we need workers to fill those jobs. Our STEM education is not producing the students we need. Our immigration system is broken, so we're not able to get the H-1Bs in we need to take the jobs. We have a jobs problem. Talk about that in your final wrap up, and we're so glad that you're here to talk about these items. So go ahead.
Sure. Well, I mean, that's probably one of the long-term negative consequences that people fear the most. AI is coming for your job, but the reality is complicated. And it's already, this isn't something that we need to be talking about in a decade. This is something that's already at issue now. If you look at the Hollywood writers' strike, that's one of the big elements of disagreement between the writers and the studios is the writers would like a commitment from the studios that they will not use AI in creating scripts. So, we have to think like, is this a reasonable thing to have? And in a way, I hope it catalyzes a bigger discussion about this, because on the one hand, you can look at that and say, if I was a writer, that would seem completely reasonable. Why, if we have AI writing scripts, it's going to require fewer writers, that's going to take writers' jobs away. That's something that the union ought to be fighting against, right? On the other hand, is it short-sighted to think that? Because we don't know what disruption is going to bring, only that it will be disruptive. And if we let the principles of free markets operate, it will largely be beneficial to everyone. Maybe or maybe not the writers, just like maybe or maybe not the textile workers in pre-industrial revolutionary England. But, think about this. Combine AI script writing with generative AI's ability to generate movies. You might see a world where instead of 1,000 new pilots a year, we're generating 100,000 new pilots, this explosion of content, where when you go to Netflix, you're not seeing a bunch of content that is created with a broad audience in mind. You're seeing content that was created maybe just for you, right? This is a series that's only been generated for you. That could create more, an order of magnitude more jobs for scriptwriters. A landscape like that. And yes, it would be scriptwriters who knew how to use AI to empower them to create scripts.
Fascinating.
But it's not fair to say that AI is going to take scriptwriters' jobs away. The reality is much more complicated. So that's the kind of thinking, extrapolational thinking that we're going to have to start doing. But to pretend that we can prevent the disruption, I think is foolish. We need to mitigate the harms of the disruption. We need to manage the disruption. We need to, do that instead of preventing the disruption.
I love hearing about a balanced approach. So we're harnessing the benefits of AI while safeguards to protect our workers. That's the balance that we're hoping that all the consumers, the public will think about, and not just think about the Terminator and SafeNet and the doomsday scenarios, but also think about disease, think about curing previously unsolvable disease, helping us predict severe weather, helping us with learning disabilities, helping us with our global leadership. I know China's not going to let go as they invest in AI. Having America lead it with our values and innovation is the way forward. I want to just thank all of you for your participation in our event today. I want to take a quick moment of privilege to thank the TechNet staff. If you're a TechNet staff, could you please raise your hand? The TechNet staff made this whole day possible. We had some great speakers today. I hope that you enjoyed our materials. Our staff is going to stay. If you would like to come up and speak with them about any of these issues, we'd be really happy to. Remember that we've launched yesterday our AI for America campaign, investing $25 million into getting the word out about the positive aspects of AI. So as you think about the risks, we're also going to think about the positives. We hope you'll continue this discussion after you leave here. It's certainly going to keep going. This isn't going anywhere. Thank you again, and help me close by joining a round of applause for the Congressman for coming today. Have a good day.